Trump's attorney Sidney Powell has revealed that Eric Coomer, Dominion's head of product and strategy, has disappeared. In an interview with Newsmax, she also said that its headquarters in Toronto and Denver, Colorado, are empty. The Dominion voting software has come under heavy scrutiny recently for suspected election fraud, manipulating votes from one candidate to the other. Representatives from Dominion also did not attend a court hearing in Pennsylvania on November 19, where the House of Representatives were planning to question Dominion on possible election manipulation. This has raised suspicions online that they may have something to hide. On the Toronto headquarters closure, Powell said, the Dominion office suddenly closed and moved away from Toronto. The headquarters originally shared the office with Soros Corporation. Its U.S. headquarters in Denver was also suddenly closed and moved away. Their employees deleted their names from LinkedIn. It also deleted any relationship with the company. More than 100 employees of the company did this. Joe Oltmann from Gateway Pundit also investigated further into Eric Coomer, and found out that he has ties to Antifa, a far-left organization that is also anti-Trump. He claimed that he infiltrated an online Antifa meeting, and during which, Antifa members referred to him as Eric from Dominion. Oltmann also said that during the call, someone asked, "What are we going to do if Trump wins?" To which Coomer allegedly replied, "Don't worry about the election, Trump's not gonna win. I made sure of that." After exposing Coomer's background, Oltmann has since been suspended from Twitter and has received death threats.
Welcome back, everyone. We're here speaking with Matt Braynard about his research when it comes to the data in the different electoral states, including Georgia. And I know you found some really interesting findings. I'm hoping we can go over them with you now.
Be happy to do that.
Now, why don't we start with these P.O. boxes that were being used as home addresses, because this is a pretty strange situation. What exactly did you find with this?
Well, the law in Georgia is when you register to vote, you have to mark down what your actual residence is. So you can have a separate mailing address, which is fine, that they will record, but you have to put down what your actual residence is. Now, even if you're homeless, you can write down a particular park bench or homeless shelter, anything like that. If you live in your car, you can just, list where you park your car. But what we had found was a large number of people, substantial, especially given how tight the margin is, well over 1,000, who voted in this election, listed themselves at addresses that are in fact postal facilities. Facilities the Postal Service either lease or own. So that could include a post office, the UPS store, FedEx store, anything like that. And not only did they list themselves there, but they disguised a P.O. box as an apartment. So rather than saying P.O. Box 123, the address is listed as apartment 123. And that's a major red flag. And what's also remarkable about these individuals is that almost all of them voted early absentee. Very few voted in person. So that really raises a red flag because they're illegally registered, and not just incidentally, but intentionally meant to deceive by listing, suite number or unit number rather than technically what it is, which is a box number.
So in other words, people were using these P.O. boxes or other mail addresses as home addresses to get mail-in ballots, early absentee ballots. And then they were disguising the fact that these were P.O. boxes by saying they were apartment numbers. Is this accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. Apartment numbers, suite numbers, unit numbers, anything other than a box number. And we found over 1,000 of them in Georgia. In fact, over 1,400 so far in Pennsylvania as well, with the very same tactic.
Well, and this is interesting too, because if you see one anomaly, I assume maybe it was a mistake. But if you see thousands of them, it's a bigger issue. And if you see it being replicated in multiple areas, as a data analyst, what does that show you typically?
Well, it raises a very big red flag, the kind of red flag that should draw the attention of law enforcement from the state all the way up to the FBI. And that's data we're sharing with them, but it's also going into the litigation that different legal teams will be filing to bring greater scrutiny to this election in Georgia and in Pennsylvania.
Did you look into the names of the individuals? Is there any way to verify if these were real people?
Our initial review of them was based solely on the voter data itself and matching it up against the publicly available list that the U.S. Postal Service provides. We haven't dug any deeper into who these individuals are because we're just under the clock so much right now. Everything has to be done yesterday.
And do you see Republican, Democrat, Independent? Is there any way of telling who they voted for?
At this point, no, but what is remarkable is that unlike the general population where a substantial percentage votes in person, Very few of them voted in person. They overwhelmingly voted by mail.
Now, I know you've looked at a few different pieces of data. Another big piece is, for example, people who sent in their ballots and they were not received. Can you tell us about what you found with this?
Sure. There was a number of people in all 6 states where we were doing our tests who the state marked as having requested an absentee ballot, but they didn't return it. So we reached out to these people and asked 2 questions. The first question we asked is, did you actually request that ballot? And in many cases they said no, which is a big red flag, because somebody had to request that ballot, and by law it had to be them or somebody that they designated legally to do so. The second question we asked was, did you return that ballot? And many people said yes, yes we did, meaning that the state did not receive it and their vote did not count. And that is also a red flag. And we're hoping that by making this data discovery, that it will lead to judicial remedies that could bring greater scrutiny to the election, such as signature evaluation or manual recounts, as well as law enforcement to look into exactly who requested those ballots, and then if the people did mail them back in, why they didn't get counted and why they didn't make it to the clerk's office.
About how many are we talking here in terms of ballots? What percentages roughly we're looking at?
Well, because we reached out to these people using a call center after taking a massive universe and then trying to match phone numbers to it, which eats away at the universe. And then when we start dialing these numbers, well, some of those are going to be bad, and some are just going to go straight to voicemail, people won't answer, and then some of them, people will pick up the phone and they'll hang up immediately because they don't want to talk to us. When we filter that down, we end up with a relatively small universe compared to the entire universe of maybe a couple thousand people. But what I believe is that the sample we find can be soundly, statistically applied to the universe to make a projection as a whole. And the numbers are pretty startling.
Now, in terms of Republican, Democrat, what are the percentages you've seen roughly between, are these Republicans, Democrats? Is it more one side or the other? Have you seen any data on this?
In most of these states, we're not looking at party registration because we are not trying to push an agenda of political bias. So our argument is just Americans who are registered to vote, who intended to, are victims of some kind of fraud or clerical error, take your pick. So our case is basically, we're not trying to make it sound like we're being partisan. So in almost all of the cases of the 35 experiments we've run, 34 of them did not pay any attention to partisanship.
And is this also a state-by-state thing you've seen in multiple states?
Yes, in all the states that we did this analysis, five states, not counting Nevada. Nevada doesn't really apply here necessarily because they bulk mailed absentee ballots to everybody. All of the other states, though, you were required to request that absentee ballot. So in those 5 states, we found that to be a universal problem, to a greater degree in some states than others, but a present and persistent problem nonetheless.
And so let's look at this individually. So people are saying, for example, in Pennsylvania that, of course, the local Supreme Court threw out the case. Are you probably going higher now? And people are saying, no, there's no evidence of voter fraud, no evidence of problems, no reason to look further into it. You've now identified 2 pretty key indicators that something may have happened. One being people, of course, using P.O. boxes, mail addresses, and seemingly intentionally misrepresenting the nature of those. So they're saying P.O. box, saying apartment number, so on. And in addition to it, people sending in ballots that were not received. Now, based on your analysis of this, what does this show you in terms of what we're looking at?
Well, it goes beyond just those tests. We ran 6 different analyses, in fact 7 now in Pennsylvania, and all of them showed problems. We ran an analysis where we called people who had moved, yet they were told that they had a ballot cast in their name. We called them and asked, did you vote? Did you actually cast that ballot? And we found people that said no, they didn't. We dialed into precincts that had exceptionally high turnout and spoke to people who had voted in this election but didn't have a record of voting much at all, if ever at all, before, and found people in that universe that said, no, I did not cast a ballot. Somebody else cast that ballot in my name. We found people who we've determined no longer lived in that state yet had ballots cast in their name, were no longer legal residents because they filed an NCOA card, or they subsequently registered to vote in another state, yet they were voting back in, say, Pennsylvania, for example. We found this universally. We've also found people who cast multiple ballots in their name, so they would vote in, say, Ohio and Pennsylvania. So we found these problems endemic to all of the states. And I think it's a pretty big indicator that Our election system either has tremendous problems with clerical errors, and that's probably the case regardless, or that there was a serious effort and great numbers to cast illegal ballots, either as part of an organized effort or by individuals just making the decision on their own to cast votes that they know they weren't entitled to cast. So we've had many anecdotes, and our data backs up that this is a real phenomenon. If somebody, say in Georgia, who moves to New York City, decides that their vote in New York City doesn't really matter, and then they just say, well, I'm going to go cast my ballot in Georgia via absentee. That's an illegal ballot. And when the election's that close, this election, it appears to me, has been decided by ballots that are highly questionable, that are anomalous. So, and that's why I came to my conclusion that I did, is that I cannot say with confidence who won this election. I don't think anybody can.
Based on the numbers you're seeing, the estimates you're looking at, just for example in Georgia, based on the numbers you've seen, because it's a small margin that Biden is ahead by, would this be enough, if it did flip the other way, to turn the state?
Easily. The number of questionable ballots surpasses the vote margin in at least 3 states right now: Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. May be the case in other states, depending on whose analysis you're looking at, but just using the data that I came up with myself and this team developed, not projecting anything, not looking at anybody else's analyses, just on the data that we found, the actual names of people who are registered to vote who cast ballots that I can point a finger at saying that that was an illegal ballot, more than enough of the margin in Georgia, more than enough of the margin in Arizona, more than enough of the margin in Wisconsin, and in Georgia by a substantial amount. I mean, just the people who no longer meet residency requirements is almost 21,000. That's substantially higher than the margin, and not even taking into account the other analysis we've done to identify extremely questionable ballots.
So you're making, it's a pretty bold statement. You're saying that based on the data you're looking at, you don't feel confident in saying who could be the projected winner of the election because the amount of anomalies you're looking at, and of course you're looking at hard data. That's a bold statement to make, but I know you're a data guy, so tell us a bit more about how you're making that projection.
Well, what's interesting is that 8 years ago, the New York Times wrote an article talking about mail-in ballot fraud and said that in some of these cases, in some races, because of the potential for this, it may not be possible to know who the actual deserved winner is. And that's happened in many cases in the past because of voter mail fraud. And here we are again with the margin so close that the number of questionable ballots surpasses the margin. But all the analysis that we've done don't really require you to say, trust me about a magical mathematical formula or some pattern we discovered or something that supposedly happened in the software of the voting machines. I can give you the list of the people who voted in this election, who filed national change of address cards in Georgia, moving themselves to another state. And I can also show you the subsequent state voter registrations of these individuals in other states who then cast earlier absentee ballots back in Georgia. I can show you the names of the people and the records of them having voted in multiple states in the raw data that the states make available. So this isn't speculative. This is just what the data shows.
Yeah, and of course, just for our viewers also, we are going to be going over the data. We can't show it at this time just because it's being used in these lawsuits, of course. But this is interesting because usually when we talk about suspected voter fraud, when we talk about the different types of anomalies we see, that's different from hard data. And so what you're talking about now is hard data, hard evidence. Is this accurate?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't get any harder than this. This is legit data, processed, matched straight from the state. There's no speculation, there's no charts. They're not asking you to take anything on faith. And you don't have to have a background in computer science or statistics or software engineering to understand what I'm going to show you or what we've presented. When we've discussed this, when I did the presentation on Twitter or on YouTube or sharing numbers, everyone can understand what's happening here. It's incredibly transparent.
Now, in terms of the litigation process, where are things at right now? Because a lot of Americans are like, we hear about lawsuits and it seems like things are kind of all over the place. Where are things at with this data in terms of bringing it to the public attention through lawsuits?
That's a better question for the attorneys. What I can share is that I've signed declarations that are supposedly going to filings in 5 different states. I'm working with legal teams, I think, in almost all of the pivotal states providing them with data and analysis. Sometimes they have a question and I or my team are able to run it down, and we try to give them the answers, but most importantly is that we're just giving them declarations. I'm signing witness reports as an expert, and if needed I'm going to be testifying in court if it gets to that point.
Now, you mentioned that this may lead to recounts, this may lead to other forms of analysis. One concern people have had is that, for example, in some states they do recounts, but they don't take into consideration the problems that were introduced, for example, with the ballots. If recounts are done, or say different types of analysis are done based on this, what will the process be? Will they have to change the way they count the ballots based on this?
So the problem here is that all the analysis that I did after the election should have been done by a campaign or a party or another organization before Election Day, during the election process, objecting to ballots that should be counted, having the voter rolls cleaned, filing lawsuits to get the state to remove people who were no longer eligible to vote. All of that should have been happening in the lead up, because that's when it can really be fixed. Once they strip those ballots out of those absentee envelopes, it becomes very difficult to come up with a real remedy. And you know, it's unfortunate, but short of a judge ordering a do-over, another election, which has been the precedent in other cases where there's been widespread anomalies, such as the ones I've discovered, you know, in like mayoral races or other types of municipal elections. Short of that, I really don't see how you fix this.
Now, is there anything else you'd like to say, or are there any points you feel we missed that you think are important to mention?
I think that this project generated a tremendous amount of momentum. We've got almost 9,000 donors to the program, a tremendous following of the program on all the social media platforms. I think what this has created for me and the people I've been working with is the opportunity to relaunch an organization that we tried to launch 4 years ago called Look Ahead America, with the dual objective of registering, engaging, and turning out to vote disaffected patriotic Americans with blue-collar or rural backgrounds, as well as doing this hard work to prevent potential voter anomalies by auditing a state's voter list, by showing up and being poll watchers on Election Day, by very aggressively trying to secure the election and the ballot box. So in the past, when I tried to launch this organization last time, I pretty much went hat in hand to big major donors, people whose names you would recognize as being the big donors on the right, and they just didn't buy into it. But what I've now realized is that these small dollar donors who funded this project to the tune of almost more than $650,000, perhaps those people have the wisdom to understand why the right cannot ignore community organizing, why ACORN cannot have a counterpart on the right, or why it must have a counterpart, why the field of voter registration can't be abandoned to the left, to the people like George Soros and Steyer who fund that to the tunes of millions. So beginning in the next couple of weeks, and ideally in time for January, we'll be relaunching Look Ahead America with the goal of raising just a relatively small sum of around probably $800K, which would fund 4 field offices and about 16 staffers in a key state like Pennsylvania and or Virginia, which has an election in 2021, to really engage in voter registration, voter engagement, and voter turnout on the right, as well as fighting voter fraud in the states. And eventually the dream is to have Look Ahead America affiliates in all 50 states.
Hey Matt, real pleasure having you on Crossroads. Thanks for taking the time for this.
Glad to talk to you. Anytime.
For your last Thanksgiving at the White House?
Well, we don't know what is last. If you look at what's going on, you have to really take a look at what's going on. They're finding tremendous discrepancies in the votes, and nobody believes those numbers. Those numbers are incorrect numbers. A lot of numbers have already been reported that's incorrect. You're going to see things happening over the next week or two that are going to be shocking to people. If you look at the numbers in Michigan, if you look at the numbers in Pennsylvania, if you look at fraudulent voting and fraudulent votes. So I can't say what's first and what's last in terms of, is this the last one, or is this the first one of a second term? We'll see what happens. Nobody wants to see the kind of fraud that this election has really come to represent. We are looking at things that are so bad in Georgia. They don't want to show us signatures. The reason they don't want to show us signatures is very simple, because we will find thousands and thousands. It's a very close race. It's hair thin. But we'll find thousands and thousands of discrepancies, fraud. Why they aren't wanting to show those signatures is amazing. They're doing recounts, and even in the recount, they found thousands of votes that were off. But now we want to look at the signatures, and you will find tens of thousands of false ballots, forged ballots. You'll see it all over. You're going to see a lot of it. And you go to Pennsylvania. You saw the meeting we had yesterday with Pennsylvania. You saw people come up, they went to vote, and they said, no, you can't vote. Somebody else already sent in a ballot, and a woman. But this is happening tens of thousands of times. I think it was 600 and some odd thousand, 687,000 fraudulent votes cast in Pennsylvania. And I will tell you, if you look at the State House now, the Republican State House, they're starting to see what's going on there. But they've really known it for a long time. Then you go to Michigan, and you look at what happened in Wayne County in Detroit. I went through a list. I went almost every county, and you see it, almost everybody, 78%, 72%, 68%, going through the list. Then you get to Wayne, and something happened. Tremendous numbers. You saw the canvassers. They refused to sign their document because they said, we can't sign a fraudulent document. Horrible things went on. That's in Wayne County, Detroit. But you look at the votes that were just tabulated, and they were left today. Look at all the counties. I won almost all of them, except Detroit was so egregious. It was phony. Look at what's going on in Wisconsin. Wisconsin, they're finding tremendous discrepancy. You just take a look at that. Tremendous discrepancy. And elsewhere. So we're going to see what happens. But you can't have somebody assume office and already they want to get rid of America first. I mean, they want to get rid of America first. They don't want America first. You know why? Because China doesn't want it. China expressed their wish, please get rid of America first. And the Biden administration said, oh, that's okay, we'll get rid of America first. No, we don't want to get rid of America first. We want to put America first. And other countries should put themselves first, too, and I tell them that all the time. But we don't want to get rid of it. So I don't know what is going to happen. I know one thing, Joe Biden did not get 80 million votes. And I got 74 million, but there were many ballots thrown away, so I got much more than that. But I got 74 million. 74 million is 11 million more than I got last time. It's millions more than Ronald Reagan got when he won all. He won 49 states, I guess. He won 49 states, yes. And it's millions more than Hillary Clinton got. Joe Biden did not get, and by the way, Joe Biden did not beat Barack Obama with the black vote. Didn't beat him, okay? But they have him as beating him. And if you look at the numbers are false. The numbers are corrupt. It was a rigged election, 100%, and people know it. That's why you have people marching all over the United States right now. They know it was a rigged election. And look at what's happening in Georgia. A lot of things are being found in Georgia, and they are absolutely against showing. I mean, it's a sad thing. They don't want to show signatures. It can be solved if you show signatures. But you're going to find out the people that signed aren't the people that are supposed to be signing. You're going to find that the people that signed those envelopes, they didn't do the ballots, envelopes. And then somebody said maybe the envelopes were thrown out. There's tremendous fraud here. If you look at, wait just one second, if you look at 10 o'clock in the evening, you saw what happened. Then you had these massive dumps. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. You have Dominion, which is very, very suspect to start off with. Nobody knows the ownership. People say the votes are counted in foreign countries. No, and much worse than that, by the way, with Dominion. So, you know, Dominion is also partially based in Canada, but it's based in other countries, too. And nobody knows where the votes, but, you know, Canada refuses to use Dominion. Canada uses paper ballots. So think of it. They're based in Canada, and Canada refuses to use them. They're smart. They use paper ballots because paper ballots are the only thing, frankly, the only thing that really you're going to get an accurate tab on, because those machines are fixed, they're rigged. You can press Trump and the vote goes to Biden. All you have to do is play with a chip. And it's down, it's shown all the time. All you have to do is play with a chip. And they played with a chip, especially in Wayne County, in Detroit. you take a look. In Philadelphia, you take a look. We've had excellent meetings with senators from Pennsylvania, Republican senators and others, and they're seeing things. They knew it was dishonest, but they didn't know it was this dishonest. No, and you'll see it all. You'll see it all. So we'll see. Speaking of Georgia, I'll be going there. I spoke with the two great senators. They're great senators, Kelly and David. I'll probably be going on Saturday. We're looking for a site. We're going to have a tremendous turnout, and we seem to always have a good turnout. The people are very disappointed that we were robbed. We were robbed. I won that by hundreds of thousands of votes. Everybody knows it. You go down the streets, there are Trump-Pence signs all over the place, and we won that by hundreds of thousands, Georgia. So they're disappointed. I don't want them to be disappointed. That'll solve itself. We're finding the votes. Once we get to the signatures, we'll take over 100%. Once we get to signature 100%, we will take over Georgia, and we will get Georgia. But they have to show us the signatures. Stacey Abrams pulled the wool over the Secretary of State. I don't know who he is, but the Secretary of State.
He said he donated to you.
It doesn't matter. I mean, you know, he says that too, but I don't know him. I never met him. I have no idea who he is. All I know is that's the ultimate. You know, I donated to Trump. I respect Trump. I love Trump. I think Trump is great. By the way, we're giving nothing. This guy got played like I've never seen anybody played. Tell him if he donated to Trump, if he likes Trump, let us see the signatures. Why is he not letting us see? There's only one reason you can't see the signatures. That's because there's fraud all over the place. And even without looking at signatures, as you know, we found thousands of wrong votes. And by the way, always against me. It was not like 50-50. It was always against me. The other thing, take a look at Michigan. Take a look at what they did with respect to counties. Every county, 78%, 72%, 76%, 59%, the whole thing, one after another after another. And then you get to Detroit, and it's like more votes than people, dead people voting all over the place. But anyway, going back to Georgia just for a second. So I'll be going there on Saturday night, and maybe I'll go twice. It's very important that we win those races. These are two great people. I know them both very well. They're both great people, and I think the two people, you know, I beat the one gentleman. He ran against a congressional candidate who was an excellent person, frankly, and he didn't even live in the right community, and that's how we won. So now I have to beat him again. He lost as a congressman. He was going for Congress, as you remember, and now against Karen, and now he's running against David. He doesn't deserve to be there. He's a lightweight. And the other one is either a communist or a socialist. I can't figure that one out yet. But he's either a communist or a socialist, probably a communist. This is not for Georgia. And I just want to tell my people, don't be disappointed yet, because this race is far from over. But I'm going on Saturday night. I'll be in Georgia. We're going to have a tremendous crowd. They're looking for the right site. Probably we'd love to take one of the big stadiums, but you can't because of the COVID. So we'll have an outdoor form of probably an airport. Most likely it's an airport. They're looking for the biggest space. And we'll have, you know, tens of thousands of people show up. But I think it's very important. And then I may go a second time, depending on how they're doing. I may go a second time. But they're two really good people. Yeah. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Mr. President, if the Electoral College votes for Joe Biden on December 14th, will you concede the election?
It's going to be a very hard thing to concede, because we know there was massive fraud. So as to whether or not I can get this apparatus moving this quickly, because time isn't on our side, everything else is on our side, facts are on our side. This was a massive fraud. This should never take place in this country. We're like a third world country. We have machines that nobody knows what the hell they're looking at. I mean, you take a look at all the mistakes they made. Look at even Georgia. Look at all the mistakes they made, and all that was is a simple, you press a button. Look at Georgia, all the votes they found just by going, and I said they shouldn't even do it because it doesn't mean anything. They're doing a recount right now in Georgia that is meaningless. The only recount that matters in Georgia is to look at the signatures on the envelope, and you will find that those signatures do not match the people that were, many of them, hundreds of thousands of them, hundreds of thousands, and I only lost by 12,000 votes. I didn't lose. I didn't even like to say I lose. I only, I guess we're 11 or 12,000 votes short. That's out of millions and millions of votes. They just got it over the line. And one of the things that happened, I did so well, and I was told this in 2 other states, that they didn't know what to do. They panicked. Take a look at their drops at 3 o'clock and 3:42 in the morning on certain states. They did drops where you're going along like this, and then you have a spike that goes up to the ceiling and down. It's disgraceful. We can't let that happen. And I will tell you, in Philadelphia, the Republicans, that State House Republicans, are very, very upset. And it's sort of appropriate because Philadelphia has become very activist. If you look at what's going on, they don't want that to happen to Pennsylvania, to the state of Pennsylvania. And it was, I don't even like to use, it was a rigged election.
But sir, just to be clear, if the Electoral College votes for Joe Biden, will you concede?
Well, if they do, they made a mistake, because this election was a fraud. Just so you understand, this election was a fraud. I mean, they have Biden beating Obama on Obama's vote in areas that mattered in terms of the election, in swing states. And yet he's losing to Obama all over the place. But he's beating Obama in swing states, which are the states that mattered for purposes of the election. So, no, I can't say that at all. I think it's a possibility. They're trying to, look, between you people, don't talk to me that way. You're just a lightweight. Don't talk to me that way. Don't talk to, I'm the president of the United States. Don't ever talk to the president that way. All right, I'm going to go with another question. Go ahead.
So if the Electoral College does elect President-elect Joe Biden, are you not going to leave this building?
Just so you, certainly I will. Certainly I will. And you know that. But I think that there will be a lot of things happening between now and the 20th of January. A lot of things. Massive fraud has been found. We're like a third world country. We're using computer equipment that can be hacked. They talk about glitches. How many glitches did they find? So a glitch. Oh, gee, we had a glitch, 5,000 votes. In all cases, right? In all cases, the votes went from Trump to Biden. They didn't go from Biden. The glitches were never from Biden to Trump. So they had many glitches. And they said, oh, we had a glitch. A glitch is like the equipment is a little broken. We'll fix it up. No, a glitch is, in this case, we caught them cheating. We caught them stealing. We caught a fraudulent effort to get votes. And they said, oh, yes, it's true, there was, and there were many of them. But here's the problem. There were probably 10, 20, 30 times that didn't get caught. We just got lucky and caught numerous of them. But what that is very simple. If you look at the glitch means, right? It means, oh, we got caught with the votes. And now, let's just call it a glitch. It wasn't the machinery. And by the way, the machinery, if you look, just take a look anywhere on the internet, you will see many, many people where they're experimenting with this stupid machinery, where if you set it a certain way, the votes go from Trump to Biden. If you look at these counties, if you look at Arizona, where I was going to win very easily, I've had the biggest politicians in Arizona say there was no way you lost Arizona. There's no way I lost Pennsylvania with his anti-fuel and with his anti-fracking and all of the things that they stand against. There was no way. Now, Texas, you all said that I was going to lose Texas by a lot, 4 points. I won Texas by 8 or 9 points, right? I won it very easily. In Wisconsin, you all said I was going to lose, or the polls said, certain polls, Washington Post, ABC, said I was going to lose by 17 points. Think of how dishonest. I thought I was going to win it, and essentially I did win it. It's very, very close. It's very, very close. So we're going to win because they found, by the way, in Wisconsin, they have found massive discrepancy. Just so you understand, massive discrepancy. But they said I was going to lose by 17 points, and I won the state, okay? But it's very close. It shows very close. Whether you say win or lose, it shows very close. But when you look at the massive discrepancy that we'll be revealing, that's already been revealed. Everybody knows it. They just don't want to play it. Between big tech and the fake news media, you just put out like this little railroad trade. Now, I think it's not right that he's trying to pick a cabinet, but I can't imagine whether it's courts or legislatures, if you're going to catch hundreds of thousands of false ballots, and I'm talking in each state. And just so you understand, many, many more votes that we're talking about that we need. You understand? I'm not saying we caught 23 dead people but we were short 20,000 votes. No, no. We have tens of thousands votes more than we need in all cases, okay? In all cases. So I think you're going to see something. I mean, I think it's going to be a very big story. Yeah, please.
Yes, Mr. President.
It's going to be not only a big story, it's the most important story of our time. Yes.
Yes, Mr. President. If Joe Biden takes over the White House on January 21st, will you announce a candidacy for 2024?
Well, no, I don't want to talk about 2024 yet.
Will you
because this is far from being. Look. I and the people that work in this are very professional, and all of this stuff is coming. A lot of it came out. If you look at the Philadelphia meeting, if you look at the Pennsylvania meeting yesterday, a lot of it came out. This has a long way to go. This has a long way to go. You're going to find tremendous fraud. You're going to find fraud of hundreds of thousands of votes per state. You're going to find fraud of many, many times the votes that I need. Again, we're not talking about less votes where, 20 votes, but it doesn't turn the election. No, we're talking about thousands and thousands of votes beyond what we need to turn a state. When you see that, I think it's very hard even for the media to say that, Biden should win the state. And there's no way that Biden got 80 million votes. By the way, the only way he got 80 million votes is through a massive fraud. There's no way that he got 80 million votes.
Can you give us a timeline on when you're going to present this evidence of voter fraud you talked about?
Well, it's happening now. I mean, we're in courts. We're in courts, but we're also in front of legislatures, and we're doing very well in front of the states.
Mr. President, if you don't think that the presidential election was legitimate, and if you think that it was stolen, what confidence do you expect voters in Georgia to have when they go to the polls to vote for, say, Loeffler or Perdue?
Well, I told them today, I think you're dealing in a very fraudulent system. I think I'm very worried about that. They are tremendous people. Kelly Loeffler, David Perdue are tremendous people. They should be in the United States Senate. They're desperately needed. But I told them today, I said, listen, you have a fraudulent system. You have a system where the flick of a switch or the putting in of a new chip can change the course of history. And you have to be very careful. I read this morning where Stacey Abrams has 850,000 ballots accumulated. Now, that's called harvesting. You're not allowed to harvest, but I understand the Secretary of State, who is really, he's an enemy of the people. The Secretary of State, and whether he's Republican or not, this man, what he's done, supposedly he made a deal, and you'll have to check this, where she's allowed to harvest, but in other areas, they're not allowed. What kind of a deal is that? They're not allowed to harvest during the presidential. But how can she say she has 850,000 ballots? That would mean that she's got 850,000 ballots for her. That's not supposed to be happening. That's not an election. An election should be a one-day deal. You walk in and you vote. And if you can't do it, if for some reason you're not feeling well or there's a problem, but what they did is they used COVID in order to defraud the people of this country. And the whole world is watching, and the whole world is laughing at our electoral process. The whole world is watching, and it's a very sad thing, very sad thing. And you know what? I've done a lot of things. You just saw Space Force, and you've seen the tax cuts and the regulation cuts and the way we've taken care of the vets and what we've done with Anwar and Alaska and all the different things we've done, more than just about anybody's done, and even though it's 4 years. There are those that say what I'm doing right now is the single most important thing I've ever done. And I think it may be true. It may be true. The vaccines, and by the way, don't let Joe Biden take credit for the vaccines. If Joe Biden, Joe Biden failed with the swine flu, H1N1, totally failed with the swine flu. Don't let him take credit for the vaccines, because the vaccines were me, and I pushed people harder than they've ever been pushed before. And we got that approved and through, and nobody's ever seen anything like it. And you got a big resistance in the FDA from years and years of people working there, for years and years, different administrations. But the vaccines there are those that say it's one of the greatest things. It's a medical miracle. Don't let anyone try and take credit for it. But with all of the things I've done, this could be the most important, because there's been voter fraud going on, but never at this scale. Tens of millions of ballots have been sent out to people that didn't even want them. Many people, and I know you've heard, many people have received 2, 3, and 4 ballots. And many people have taken those 2, 3, and 4 ballots and they voted them. This election was a fraud. It was a rigged election. I mean, I hate to say it, but this was a rigged, at the highest level, it was a rigged election. So we have to figure it out. And yes, I think it's very dangerous for the 2 people that are running against 2 totally unqualified people. And I think it's very dangerous for our nation. And I'll go a step further. I said today, other than the fact that you have all of the eyes and ears, but the media doesn't cover it properly, because the media would, if they saw something wrong, I'm convinced the media would not report it, because, you know, you have many things that you know are wrong and you don't report. But if the media was honest in this country, which, you know, for the most part they're not, this would never have happened. This has taken place, this fraud has taken place. If the media were honest, this would never, ever have happened. But you have a big election coming up. You have a woman or somebody announced 850,000 absentee ballots have already been collected. 850. And I told David Perdue today, and I told Kelly yesterday, I said, they're talking about having collected already 800,000 ballots against you. You can't do that. You can't do that. What kind of a race is that? You can't allow that to happen. And I'm serious, if the media were honest, and if big tech were honest, which it's totally not, it's a terrible thing. That whole Section 230 is a disgrace that they even have it. But big tech is totally dishonest. If the media were honest and big tech was fair, this wouldn't even be a contest. And I would have won by a tremendous amount, And I did win by a tremendous amount, but it hasn't been reported yet. But people understand what's happened. They know what happened. Yes, let's go.
Of course, it is tradition.
Say it.
You know that it's tradition for previous presidents to go to the next president's inauguration. So will you attend?
I don't want to say that yet. I mean, I know the answer. I'll be honest, I know the answer, but I just don't want to say it yet. Look, a thing like this possibly has never happened before, but maybe people just didn't catch it. But we've caught it. We've caught hundreds of thousands of votes.
If I may,
Listen, excuse me. When they don't allow a poll watcher, which is a sacred person in our country, people don't know what a poll watcher is. A poll watcher it's considered sacred in our country. When they throw them out of rooms.
But that's not true. They didn't do that.
Sure it is. And when they put them in pens.
Your attorneys admitted.
Excuse me. No, they didn't. My attorneys did not admit anything. And it's all different places. But where they throw them out of counting rooms, where they put them in what's called pens, and they're 20, 30, 40 feet away, and in some cases 200 feet away. When things like that happen, when a woman walks in on November 3rd to vote, a proud woman, and this is by the thousands, tens of thousands, and she said, I'm here to vote. And they said, you've already voted, ma'am, I'm sorry. No, I didn't vote. I wanted to vote on November 3rd. I want to cast my vote in person. I'm sorry, ma'am, you've already voted. You voted by ballot. And then they leave. This is a horrible thing. And we have tens of thousands of that happening. This is a horrible thing. They gave Biden a lot of votes that he would never have gotten. This is not a candidate that could get 80 million votes. This is just not a candidate. This is not a candidate that beat Barack Hussein Obama with the black voter, okay? This is not a candidate that beat Obama with the black voter. This is not a candidate that beat Hillary Clinton to a pulp. It just doesn't work that way. But when you look at the number, when you look at the data, and when you look at the things we have affidavits from hundreds and hundreds of people. This election was a rigged election. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hey, happy Thanksgiving to all the listeners. You're on with two mics, Dr. Michael Schur, Colonel Mike, and today, again, our special guest, General Tom McInerney, who's going to wish us a Thanksgiving, and he has a great present for us. General, welcome back to the Two Mics Show, sir.
Great to be with you both, Colonel Mike and Dr. Mike. Thanks for having me on this very special day, and I wish you both and your families a very, very happy Thanksgiving.
And to yours, sir.
And thank you.
Go ahead, sir. Tell us the latest news. This is going to be a happy Thanksgiving after what happened yesterday.
Well, I would say this is the start of a counteroffensive in military terms and ground terms. And the reason I say that, Colonel Mike and Dr. Mike, is what we have seen is two lawsuits put in by Sidney Powell in Georgia, 104 pages, and one and the other one in 75 pages in Michigan. The highlights of that are, number one, that in Georgia, Sidney has identified 96,000 absentee ballots that were not counted into the system. So 96,000 votes have got to come off the rolls. And she's working that out. In addition, she also found out that through the Kraken, and the Kraken is the 305th Military Intelligence Battalion, who works these kind of problems, that we have Chinese and Iranian involvement.
Wow.
Very startling. That's the first I've heard it in the counting process.
Gotcha.
More to follow on that. But that certainly puts in the executive order that President Trump put out in September of 2018 comes into effect. So that is very significant. It's the first I've heard of it that it's been written, and I'm now seeing it pop up in other areas. The other areas were in Pennsylvania, for instance, the state sent out 1.8 million mail-in ballots, and then they counted 2.5 million mail-in ballots. You figure, but I think somebody was printing mail-in ballots and that they're illegal. That's 700,000 ballots, gentlemen, that have got to be taken off. And that's clearly the difference, in my humble opinion, in these states. So this is what we're seeing. And the other thing I saw came up was Wisconsin has identified 150,000 fraudulent votes, and they outline them by the numbers very accurately. So this is what is all developing. It's a ton of information coming in, much of it from crowdsourcing, from people like us, people that are studying these numbers. And the final thing I want to highlight before I want Colonel Mike in, or Dr. Mike in, is I saw a very, very important analysis of the data in real time. And when they stopped the voting in about 6 or 7 states, some number, around midnight or so, all of a sudden, around 3 or 4 numbers would come out. And it would be like, for instance, Virginia. Trump won Virginia. And now I think we're kind of surprised about it, particularly the way Fox rolled in 5 minutes after the polls closed, and Trump was way ahead. And until they stopped, then they threw in a slug of votes. But here's what happened. On that slug of votes they threw in Virginia, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Georgia, they used an algorithm. Now, how do I know they used an algorithm? Because the ratio of number of votes, so maybe 120,000, 138,000, like in Michigan, whatever it was the exact ratio in all the states, the same.
Wow, amazing.
And so right there is evidence, just looking at numbers, that an algorithm was put on it. It would be impossible to get that exact same number in 4 or 5 states around the same time.
So, General, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The way you're talking today on Thanksgiving Day, this is just a tip that we're learning about.
Precisely, Colonel Mike. And that's why I think we should say, and I'm certainly going to say it, with this data that's coming in, Biden ought to concede right now, and just concede. Now, he probably won't. But what we're talking about, because it was so massive and because so many people involved, you can't hide this. Time is not our friend, but this is treason.
Yes.
This is treason. We are looking at treason on a massive scale. And the people that were nominated by Biden to be Secretary of State and those other functions that they nominated, UN ambassador, etc., were all probably involved. They were all involved in the Russian hoax. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
And now involved with this. So the connectivity, and here's where I'm going to see, where is John Durham's report? What has John Durham done? Or is John Durham part of the deep state?
He's got to be replaced. He's got to be replaced. He's got to be pulled out. General, I had a question on the radio yesterday from a caller who wanted to know, why are we going this far, and why didn't Biden early on give us a hint of who his cabinet was until they thought they stole the election? And you never heard these names. You never heard these names when he was down in the basement or doing his drive-bys, you know, the 14 cars running around. You'd never heard these names, and instantaneously they come out of nowhere. And you say, like, what is this, a recycle program of the Clinton-Obama administration? No, these are deep staters, like you said. Dr. Mike, what do you say?
Well, I think in terms of what the general has told us over the past 2 weeks, that clearly there was an awful lot of people involved. And the price of that at the top for Biden is to make sure every one of them is rewarded. And so no one gets his nose out of joint. It can rat out the whole process. And I think that's what you're seeing in this cabinet making, because it's really a collection of nobodies, has-beens, and traitors. And it's clearly a payoff for these are nondescript swamp creatures, if you will. And I think it's a terrible, it couldn't be worse than what they have. And it's clear at the lack of quality in the people they've appointed that someone else is going to be calling the shots. And it won't be Biden, and it won't be that person who is the vice president. It will be somebody who's in touch with the foreign countries that Biden has been bought off by.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and thing to add what Dr. Mike said, in addition to this being a treasonous activity of such a scale, a lot of people involved, and that's where leaks occur. And that's why I believe the Trump administration has been laying this out. But what we don't see DOJ involvement. We don't see FBI involvement. I mean, participating to track down, to uncover this. We don't.
What is it with that?
We don't see the CIA. So those three agencies that are paramount structures of our national security apparatus, apparently some of them were participating, and the White House couldn't trust them because they'd leak it and expose it, and so they wouldn't try it. But when you start putting this all together, and you put it together in the form of 2020 and the Russian hoax, the impeachment that was in January, and then you have, which nobody has brought up except maybe us Machiavellian people, this Chinese COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if China is working on voting and the numbers of ballots, and we've mentioned before the special ops seizing the servers in Frankfurt, Germany, if we mention this, is there a connection? I want to leave it alone now, but I'm beginning to think that there was a connection between those Democrats and China. Now, let's leave it off there, but there are too many things, and Dr. Mike in our world start seeing these things, and you start seeing patterns of behavior, and certainly COVID-19, the pandemic, allowed the open mail-in ballots. And like when I pointed out where you had in Pennsylvania, 1.8 million votes sent out, but then they counted 2.5 million votes mail-in ballots. I mean, something is grossly wrong. And the American people, and that's why you're so valuable, what you both are doing here and having.
Well, we're happy to have you on, General. We're all patriots, and we're doing this to expose it to the American people, to our audience. And we're thankful that you come on all the time and we expose this information weekly.
Well, and it's changing dramatically weekly.
Yes.
And that's why when we started out, Colonel Mike, I said, the counteroffensive has started. There is more. And I believe if it was done properly, if Dr. Mike and I were doing it, we would have enough communications intelligence to have voice and emails, etc., on those individuals that were doing this against our nation, committing treason in defiance of the Constitution that we all upheld to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And they should have alerted and done it legally. Probably you'd have to do the Supreme Court because it was such a high level. And when you look at the deep state corruption, as I mentioned, in CIA, in DOJ, and the FBI, then you have to have a very tight legal group. And the corruption in the legal office, in the legal branches, the judges, the corruption we've got there.
In the post office, sir.
The post office. It is rampant. We have never seen anything like it. This is the greatest treasonous activity that has ever happened in American history. Yet the big tech doesn't let people know. Google doesn't put this information out. They're hiding it. All the mainstream media. Look at Fox News.
Also, sir.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fox News went south on us. So this is why this is such a huge thing. People cannot even conceive anything like this, and they think they're going to get away with it, because when you have a mainstream media that is not free and open, then we have a problem, don't we, as a nation?
It is indeed a problem, sir. And I was just going to say that the one advantage that I think the good guys have in this is that the enemy is endlessly arrogant, and they assume that their enemy is stupid. And it's what sticks in my mind very clearly is Pelosi said, I don't care what happens on election day, Biden will be sworn in on the 20th of January, 2021. And that stuck in my mind because I thought, man, she probably shouldn't have said that. Just because, not because it was going to be true, but because she thought it was going to be true, because she knew what was going on.
Precisely, Dr. Mike. And the fact is Biden himself, in a moment, said he had the most sophisticated cyber warfare
That's right,
ever assembled. There's no question about it. So these things are coming fast and furious. So is the 14th of December. And so we've got to get it in the right legal hands. I hope and pray that they have already kept a few key Supreme Court justices that have not been politicized in tow and aware of it. And unfortunately, the Chief Justice would not be one of those that I would have informed what's going on.
You couldn't take a chance, sir, no.
No taking a chance.
No.
Well, he was in charge, or he's in charge of the FISA court, and he never leaked a word about what they were doing with the FISA courts during the Spygate with Trump. But going back to your statement, General, a couple of weeks ago, you talked about Joseph Stalin, about it doesn't matter who votes, it's who counts the votes. And that's what they were going with. And that's what Pelosi meant, Dr. Mike.
Yeah, I think that's right.
That was the modern Joseph Stalin. I don't care. We're going to win anyway.
Yeah.
Spot on, Colonel Mike. You tapped it right away. They were arrogant and they're bragging about it.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we're, the ship is still not fully afloat, but I think we're a bit more buoyant than we were 3 or 4 days ago. And
we are.
What I wanted to raise is this information appears to be so solid and definitive almost. And of course, it'll be up to the courts and the judges and that. But I hope that they're taking action to prevent these people from fleeing the country. I hope they have some kind of a watch list or an enumeration of people like Newsom, like the governor of Georgia, like Pelosi, like Feinstein, all of these people, and Brennan and Clapper, and you know the litany.
Right.
But the idea that these people could get away to fight again another day is one that really I find distressing.
Well, I do too, but clearly we know Biden and Obama, what their security details are, but I'm not sure what else they've done on it. And our number one priority has got to be that it's exposed.
Absolutely.
And then we take them, and they should be. I mean, frankly, I would arrest them. We have enough right now to arrest them right now while they're eating their turkey dinner, to come in and arrest them just the way they did some of the Republicans. But
most of them are probably eating King Pao chicken, sir.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. The danger is, I keep coming back to, where is our FBI? Where is DOJ? And we know that the facility in Frankfurt was a CIA facility run by commercial people, but, you know.
It's not much of a cover.
Correct. But having those servers, and we also know in the Hammer and Scorecard that our friends have got the same data. But, you know, if this went to a court, it would take a long time, and we've got to be able to prove it in a short time. The founding fathers, God bless them, had never heard of cyber warfare, but they did hear of enemies, foreign and domestic.
And these are domestic enemies.
There, that this president is commander-in-chief, I think is what we are all saying, the three of us, Colonel Mike and Dr. Mike, that now is the time to arrest those individuals.
I think so, sir.
And I would too. I would
too. Colonel, Doctor, I heard Sidney Powell say that we should be able to impeach a justice. And if Roberts is going to pull shenanigans, he may be able, I don't know legally, I don't know anything about this, but she said something about he should be impeached because this is a national security issue of treason. And look, he already got a flyer. He got a pass on this Spygate stuff with the Pfizer court. So time's up. He has to come clean, and he has to either serve the country or step down or something.
Well, I think the data is so compelling, Colonel Mike, that it'll be a 9-0 vote. Even Sotomayor and Kagan and all of them cannot, when they see this evidence, cannot dispute it. If they do, then so be it. But it is so solid, and because you had to use the Kraken organization to, because they're the only ones at 305th, that was in its day, I don't know where they are now, but they used to be at Fort Huachuca. About the time, by the way, the good General Mike Flynn was out there. Does that surprise us?
General, we want to thank you. We know you have other shows and calls today, and you have a family day. Happy Thanksgiving. Always, thanks again for coming on. Anytime, you're welcome. Just let us know. Dr. Mike, both of you, you guys have a wonderful, happy, blessed holiday.
And you, Colonel.
And you too, Colonel Mike. God bless you both.
Thank you, and you, sir. Always, you and your family.